Time to start. Hello, welcome to my session, which is 5 design tips to make your Microsoft Flow, which are now called Power Automate, but I still call them flows, to make your flows run insanely fast with an exclamation mark. My name is John Liu. I'm based in Sydney, Australia. It is the middle of the, it's actually the early afternoon, 1 p.m. Very sunny blue sky, but also I'm staying at home. Please stay safe. And I'll be presenting this for the next 45 minutes or so. Now, there are a few slides I need to share. First one is a kind of announcement that the Microsoft, what traditionally is called the Sharepoint conference is now called the Microsoft 365 Collaboration Conference. Okay, so there is a name change. And the next event, so this year's SPC was cancelled, but the next event will be in March in 2021. I hope to be able to go there. I have never been to SPC, always wanted to go, and hopefully 2021 will be the year that we can all see each other in a healthy place. It will cover Teams, SharePoint, and the Power Platform. We must thank our generous sponsors, all these platinum, gold, and silver sponsors. I'll show this slide again at the end. And a little bit about me. I put out my little, this is a much better picture of me, the Flow Ninja picture. I've been a developer, consultant, and a blogger in the Microsoft world for about 20 years now. The last over 10 years has been in SharePoint, and in the recent 3 years now in the Power Platform. For my contributions, Microsoft has awarded me MVP for Office SharePoint as well as for the Power Platform. So I have both. I sit on the edge and look at both products, and how they mix together really well. I am now the founder of my own startup called Flow Studio Solutions, and the proudest thing I like to brag about is after 20 years of consulting, I took that leap to actually build my own startup. So far, I built 2 apps, Flow Studio app and also Flow Studio app is now called Power Studio and also Power Clarity. And they're used by about 4,000 people, which over the 2 years, which I think is a pat on the back. I'm very proud of how much these tools are helping people. And also I go by the name Flow Ninja and has wrote over 100 tips on Microsoft Flow. They are all on Twitter, so if I turn them all into blog posts, you will have a very long blog read. But I did make a big list at one point in middle of July. I wrote down, here's a big master list of all 100 tips on how to use Microsoft Flow to do really crazy stuff. So I've been a Microsoft Flow user since the very beginning. In fact, I used Logic Apps and a load of Azure functions way before that. So I took all that development knowledge, plus really wanting to make it work for the power user. That's kind of how my brain is wired up. I may have disconnected. Am I back? Can you get me into the meeting? Oh, I hope I'm back. I'm having some connection issues. I might turn my video off. That might help earlier. Okay. So Flow Ninja, and have authored over 100 tips. They're on my blog. 100. I'm currently up to about 115. So the number of tips keep going. And there is a raffle at the end, so you should visit the vendor booth, watch the session, submit your answers, and then you need 5 answers to win the raffle, one of these really amazing virtual reality headsets. And also consider giving to one of the charity relief funds, either International Medical Corps, United Way. All right. Today's agenda, I want to cover 5 design tips for Microsoft Flow that will make it go faster. And the 5 that I want to talk about is Decomposed, parallel, select, filter, and then batch. But if we have time, I want to get to more. And with that, I'll jump right into the demo. And I'm gonna close all the browsers. Maybe that will make everything quicker a little. So let me come over here, which is a blank flow. I want to start with the first one, which is use compose. And I see this a lot when we start. A lot of people say, well, we have things like variables, and we should initialize a variable. And let's make these a bit more interesting. We're gonna make this an array variable, and let's initialize it with 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that's 10 digits. Copy that, and we're gonna put that in here too. And then we're actually, so this is initialized, but let's rename it. We'll call it this the variable array, and we'll call this the constant array. Okay, so it's a constant, and that's a variable. And if I save and run this, you'll see that they both appear to run really quick. First time, it warms up, prepares the flow, and then I run it. And you see it's finished already before the UI decide to draw it. And you'll see this appears to run really quickly. At 0 seconds, we got an array of 10 elements. Here we go, a variable of an array that has 10 elements. But if I pop over here, so I built this tool called Flow Studio, and Flow Studio reads flows from the API and try to present it in some way that's useful. We're gonna switch over to our demo environment. And let me take out this filter. What is this? Oh. Let me just refresh this. It's loaded the wrong environment because I toggled this while thinking. Ah, well, try again. Which one is it reading? Yeah, it's reading demo, and demo is really quick. Demo is very tiny. And we have M365 VM so that's the one, and that's got one run earlier. So if I click that, and then Flow Studio shows me details of actual details of this flow. So if I right click it, I could see, here we go, we have some timing information. The constant array runs in exactly 0. It's so little that it's run at 0 seconds, but the initialized variable actually runs and take 0.109 seconds. So there is a slight performance here whenever you use variables. And this, you can see it, you can't see it here, but it's actually in the stats in here. But what you can really see, so it's the number that powered this. So the API request tells me this is actually 0.109 seconds over here. And this is even more pronounced if you're looping through some sort of array and setting variables. Each one of these set variables take a time cost. So you will notice as we write flows, and we write flows with Sharepoint, and we write flows with Sharepoint lists or document libraries or with teams. Whenever you're looping through lists of emails and documents and lists and Excel rows, the more rows you loop over, the more variables you work with, the slower that loop is. Then that's because variables are just a little bit slow. And to understand really why variables are slow, I have to introduce a bit of a programming concept. So in Flow, we might be tempted to think, oh, this is just a simple programming in kind of block diagrams. You have actions and actions, you have an if condition, you have an exit. But actually, what Flow is the whole engine is a parallel execution engine. So Flow is a parallel, or you can call orchestration engine. So each of these actions, the actions are actually parallel tasks. Now, the way that they happen to run one after another is not, it's just how the ordering of these parallel tasks. But the engine itself runs these, consider these all as tasks that could run in parallel. So in this kind of dynamic parallel programming, each variable is actually a global, kind of a global unique variable. So whenever flow needs to go and set a variable, it must reach out and say, hey, I want to update this variable. Is anyone updating it right now? No? Okay, I'm gonna grab the log. Okay, did I get the log? Yes, I got the log. Then I can update the variable, and then I need to release it. So everybody that needs to update this variable need to follow the same rules and get the log, write the variable, and then release the log. That's why variables are always slower. Now, compose in a different sense is, compose really is just write this output, write output. Okay, so you can almost think of them as constants. So in programming we have things like let variable 1 equals to John, and you can also have const variable, well, it will make const, right? C1, C2 is John. And then really that means this could potentially still change. var1 could change to something else, but C2 cannot change. It will always be John. So you can think of compose as a kind of define a constant within the scope. And where this really benefits is once we get into a loop, and I want to show you this. So let's do into apply to each. Sorry, apply to each, yeah. And we actually do 2 of them. And how should we do it? We're gonna have this one be the constant. So this is applied to each constant. That's applied to each. And then let me, sometimes these 2 will jump because this one starts with an A and this one is a C. They sometimes switch position. Actually, I might just show you that happens. But let me quickly set up this thing. So I want to create a compose in each one of them, and then I want to basically say use the character. That's the character that. And if you look at the expression, it's the expression items with the name of this applied to each. There are 2 ways you could do this. You could use that, or you could just type item. If you use item, you don't need to specify a name. If you use items, you must specify the name. So it's apply each const. Okay, so that's the name. And here I'm just gonna click that, which does the same thing. Now let me show you this. If I save and then I exit and come back, I think these 2 will switch sides because of the naming. And we're gonna do that. Otherwise, they will change back on us, and then it'll be annoying. Oh wait, no, it didn't. Okay. Oh well, I tell a lie. I thought they were gonna switch sides. But okay. What I want to do then here is let's do something extra here. Let's make a destination array. Like, let's have a new result variable. It's going to be a second. It's going to be called results. So results array. It will be array here, empty. And then in here, we're just going to append. Append to array variable, the results, and we're going to use the output of compose 2. Okay, so we're going to use that and go in here, and that one we'll leave it as it is. So we run this flow, and then you'll begin to see this is slow. 2 seconds. And then 2 seconds, you think, oh, that's not too bad. Well, let's bump that up. Let's bump this up. So we're gonna now use the expression. Oh, by the way, if you haven't seen the new editor, let's have a quick show. Sorry, I usually run with the new experimental editor, which is a much better expression designer. So I'll use that. Much easier to show you and demo what I'm doing. Okay, so get rid of this, hit the expression, which is this one, and see now the expression editor is multi-line, and you can do all kinds of fancy stuff. You can even do like multi-line just because it's prettier. So that's that. Paste that in here too. There is keyboard shortcuts, Control Shift Space. Oops, no, don't do Control Shift Space because that affects those teams. But here we go, range and range. So if I run this now, you'll see this applied to each array start to go slow. Even just starting the start, it takes longer. So both of these are looping over 100 items. So we're gonna see probably, I'm gonna guess 10 seconds, maybe 20. Oh, here we go. Oh, 21 seconds. So even looping over 100 items and doing nothing, it takes 21 seconds here. And then because of the append to array, you see appending 100 elements has an additional, about 5 seconds. So it's roughly what, 0.2 seconds each. Now, what's the next? So there is one trick to this, which is something that I talk a lot before, and I still mention that as what we call Peter's method. And Peter method is done by a Flow MVP, Peter Fenstra, over in the UK, and I call it jokingly, well, I dubbed this Peter method. And basically, Peter method is, and he has a full blog post. He has actually 2 blog posts on how this works. This is the initial blog post, and then later. But let me just show you what it does. So in Peter's method, basically we do this. Firstly, let me just show you. Let's go to the end. See, this is going to come up. At the very end, oh, right, it's appended 99. So let's do a few more things. We want to do a compose after the array. So we're basically gonna try and check the output, and we'll take the result array, which is that one. And here we're gonna do a different way. We're gonna also do compose. But Peter's method basically says we can get the output of this guy in here. And normally you will say, oh, if I try to select, see, it's not really letting me choose. Right? If I do outputs, it's like, well, the only output is const array, which is this one. It's not letting me choose this one. So we're just gonna ignore that, and we're gonna say outputs. Let me double check. In fact, I'm gonna end up with all these compose. There's so many. Compose here, so let's just double check really quickly if I pick code. So outputs compose. So we're just gonna, oops, I already typed wrong. See, I used the capital O, that's wrong. So let's go back here and then paste that in. That's good. Okay, so you can actually, this is compose, and then I will actually rename it this. Okay, and let's just run that. it will know if the designer will forbid you from dragging this out. So it will say, oh, you can't use this action used to something that's inside for each. Okay, so the designer actually prevents you from doing this, but we're telling you can write this action anyway, which is super crazy. So running this again, you see how the engine doesn't complain because it's actually a valid definition. And then we gotta wait like a good 25 seconds. 25 seconds. Yeah. And in you see this is the output of, so what Peter's method, which is referencing the output of any object on the inside of an apply each on the outside. This allows you, so that's why I call Peter's method, it's such a mouthful. But this basically concatenates every output of this. See this, every output 0 all the way to 99, and concatenates them all into one big array for each element of this applied to each. Whereas here, if I look at this, so you can kind of get the same output on both ends. Now we can make additional tweak. We can actually say, okay, let's now have the applied to each run in parallel and run up to 50. And we'll do that on both sides. And then run that again. So basically, we're now telling Flow that for each element of this, you don't have to wait for them to run sequentially. You can actually run them up to 50 parallel threads at a time. So Flow's engine will scale it out, and it's so quick that it's finished this end before while it's still thinking. See, this side is already finished. And if I expand Peter's method, you can see it's already all sorted. Now, even in the case of apply to each with an array, it's quicker. It's 12 seconds rather than the previous 25 seconds. But there is a side effect of using the array. And you might remember I talked about how the array must reach into a global lock and make sure you are the only person updating the array at any time. So even though we are running in parallel 50 threads at a time, any of these 50 threads could compete and grab the log and try to write the number. And all the other threads will just have to wait. So with the, so you will find this still has 99 number of actions, but the order is messed up because there is no guarantee which thread is gonna get the log first because they're all running in parallel. Whereas with Peter's method, it's actually the Flow engine automatically concatenating all the output, all the run output of automatically composed together. So yeah, so I wanted to talk about this method again. It's a really powerful technique. Needs a little bit of expressions, but it really makes your flow significantly faster. You can run in parallel. And one of these may be, say, for example, you have a list of names. You have a list of 100 email addresses. And then within here, you actually have to go and find each name's manager, right? So it's not something that's as simple as converting the original value to the new value. No, for each value, you have to make a call and then get that value and then still map it back into a big array. But you're going to try and do it without the variable, because if you do it without the variable, you can run in parallel and it will be done in the order. So super complex pattern to use to get really fancy results in this case. So that's actually two things that I wanted to cover. The first one is Decomposed and variables. You should really just use variables when you need to really update things. In general, when you're working with sets of array, compose is much better. This is a lot quicker than this. This is a lot quicker. See, some of these, the number one took 11 seconds to write because it just could not get the log. All the other threads keep getting the log, so it couldn't get the log until 11 seconds in. That's nearly the end, so you wouldn't expect that. And in fact, if we look at this, if we look at 0, 0 is happening right near the end, see? Just before you finish at 12. Crazy parallel worlds where nothing is what you expect. Everything's kind of random. Now, there is one more thing I wanted to show. And some people tells me, John, but we like variables. Variables give you type, right? When you define a variable as a string, it gives you type. And also, when you're trying to find how do I say it? So let's do another initialized variable. So my text. See, variables give you type. And then people say, well, and then at the end here, when I'm needing to use a text, so what's a good text control? Not compose. Text. Yeah, we have some new text functions there. So let's do find substring. So if I click this and say, give me some choices, see my text appears, and you can say my text. See, it filters very nicely, John. Whereas, if I want to find my variable constant, I can't type constant, right? I have to type output. And I still see every output, so it's kind of confusing. And I do understand that, when you use const, everything appears as output, which is hard to use. I have a funny trick, and I'll add that here, which is instead of using compose to define these, say many of our flows right up the top, you have this big block of maybe 5 different variables because you want people to set them all there, right? Like you say, initialize Sharepoint site URL, initialize email address, initialize number of is this a test run? So it's like a test or prod run, and you might have a Boolean with that. So what I suggest is you can actually use this advanced trick. There's an action called pass.json. Now, pass.json is usually for you to say, I have an unstructured content. So say site, and I will call it HBS 365 sharepoint.com. And then what's that email? And then I can be reached at johnliu@flowstudio.app. And let's say debug, and that is true. Okay. So let's say these are 3 variables. Instead of creating 3 variables, I just call this definitions. Oops, definitions. And then I could actually, so I copy that same sample, paste that here, and then done. And this generates a schema for this context. And it tells me this is string, string, and Boolean. Okay, see this? Now, if I collapse this and then I come here now, and I say I want variable, then I can say site. See here, the site property from here. Or if I do email, see the email. Or if I do Boolean, wow, this is, anyway, this is not after. And you won't see the Boolean because, well, if you type it, you can, but if you like definitions, you can't see it. Oh, it's here. Okay, I guess it passes it. But yeah, that's a, why does it say ABC? It's definitely not ABC. Anyway, ignore that. It's a Boolean. So, so pass.json can be used as a way to, if you think, oh, my flow has 20 or 10 variables up the top and it's very messy, you have to scroll halfway down just before the flow. Well, you can potentially compress the whole thing into one pass.json block and just leave it at the top. So that could knock out a whole bunch of variables. Now, pass.json and compose are the same way in that you define it and then you can't change it. So sometimes in your flow, there are real variables that you will set later on. So don't replace every variable with pass.json, but replace any of the constants are very good to replace with pass.json. And you can use this type to give to tell the flow designer what type these properties are. And you can just change it here. You can even use variables here. Like this could be a trigger, something that you get from the trigger. Anyway. Text is required. Oh, this text is okay. No, don't need. All right. So that's 2.5 tricks. I've got half an hour in already. Let me quickly rush forward. I need to do a crazy demo. This is a demo. It might be quicker if I show another flow that's existing that I built before. Sorry, I need to rush this, otherwise I won't get there. I have here, so the top is roughly the same. The bottom is where things are getting different. And I have these two lists. This is a list I just call it new items, a SharePoint list. You could think of this as any kind of list. It could be Excel, it could be SQL database, any sort of list. Could be a list of emails, or it could be a call from Microsoft Graph, and you got some sort of list from Microsoft Graph. And now I have a destination list, and this is a list that is pretty much empty. Okay, and then let me just show you this one. So I am calling SharePoint get items from my source list. So this is the list where I want to copy everything from this list into the other list. And the first thing I will do here is I use a select. So select lets me filter the columns that I want. And I wanted to show you what that means. It means that you know, SharePoint may have lots and lots of columns, but ultimately I only want title, which is the value of title, the title's value, and location, right? And the value of location. So that's all I want, right? I don't want all the other, you know, internal variables, the ID or any of the stuff. I just want these two. Okay, so select lets me remap this big array into an array with just 2 elements. Okay, in this demo, I had this filter where I remove half the item from this array, just to show if you can filter the list because you don't want every item, that's always going to help. If you don't have to insert 20 items and then go delete it later, that's the best. Filter it out first and only delete, only insert what you need. Now, what we want to do with this is we want to actually call batch operation on SharePoint, which is this batch operation, API /$batch. And we can call it using the standard. So these are all standard actions. We can use the standard send HTTP request to SharePoint. We're going to call a site. Oh, it's not the right site. I wonder if I fix the site. Oh well, let's, oops, where am I here? Let me just quickly change it. I might have changed the demo to run on a different site. Let's hope it doesn't break anything. So yeah, so that's the site. We're gonna post. That's the API /$batch. So this is on my root site. There are a few other things we need to, you know, this is pretty much copied from the SharePoint batch documentation. Underscore API /$batch. We need a content type. It's a funny content type. It's a mixed content part. It needs a boundary, which is a funny GUID. In fact, I will rename this. So this is the, there are 2 GUIDs. Okay, so we use compose again. We're gonna need 2 GUIDs, and Flow has a function for GUID. It's just GUID, and it will give you a 16-digit GUID. Now this one, we're gonna call it, this is the change set. This is the batch GUID. And the batch has a change set. In our case, all the items are part of one change set. Okay, so we have a batch GUID, and then we have a change set GUID. Now this is gonna winch because I rename a bunch of things, so it's probably unhappy. It's saying, yeah, okay, so the GUID 2 is the batch GUID. We're gonna need the batch here. That's batch, good. That's batch, good. And internally, that's the boundary, that's the change set. So change set, and batch, batch. Good. Now, additionally, what else we need? We need this thing, which is this join. So it's a join of this select. And what we have is here, these two. So for each element that we want to send into SharePoint, and remember we have about 11 elements. Yeah, 11 elements, yes. Just make sure I can count. So 11 elements, for each one of them, we want to generate this little expression. So we're actually not gonna code that. It's gonna be on the base side. It's called the copy item list. Good. So copy item list is HTTP binary. And then for each one, we're gonna insert this. We're gonna call this. So it's very similar to the SharePoint REST call. So this is exactly the SharePoint REST call, and we're gonna include the JSON here, which is this JSON. Okay. But we're gonna do it for each one of these 11 rows. So for each one, we are using the select row here in this select, right? So for each of these rows, we're gonna run the replace expression. Oh, this is hard to read. Copy that out. We're gonna run the replace expression on this text pattern, but where it says insert item, we're gonna do a string. So string here on this item, the item happens to be this guy, has the effect of doing a JSON stringify of this JSON object. Okay, so it converts this object into a string here, which is then replaced over this. So for each of the 11 rows, we end up with this same block, but with a JSON here. Okay, that's what this does. And then we combine all 11 blocks together into this repeating paragraph, and that inserts here, and then this whole thing runs. Now, let's fingers crossed. Oh, I turned on my camera, you can't see me, but my fingers crossed. Let's hope these things have no side effects on the top. I don't really know. Let me just run it and see. If errors are, we have to fix it. Generally, I build this from scratch and then show you, but I'm not juggling my time as well. So I just ran an existing one. When you're trying to demo, the buttons just feel slower. Okay, let's go. Oh, I might have ran it twice, not sure. So the first one is getting item from SharePoint. I want to show you. So we get 6 seconds to get all the items from SharePoint. This is all 11 items. Then we do the select row, and I talked about how there's a lot of different columns in SharePoint, but for each one, we just want the title and location. See this? We're not using the filter. Then we created 2 GUIDs, so 2 random GUIDs, one for change set and one for batch. We then compose this pattern. Sorry. Oops. Yeah, we compose this pattern, which needs this insert action to go here. And then we use select to map over each one of this with that string. So you see the string at the end has the JSON in here. See this? Each JSON is in place. These are the new line characters, so it's like additional blank lines. And then we send the whole thing over to SharePoint for 3 seconds, and SharePoint responded with the output of each one of them, okay, in a batch format. And if I quickly switch over to the SharePoint list, you'll see the whole thing was inserted roughly between that 3-second period. Okay, they all get inserted at the same time. We get the title and the location. They both get stamped from here into here. Okay, so that's so batch is an operation available on several APIs. It's available on Azure Blob Tables. Is that available on SharePoint lists? Most SharePoint actions you can do not just post, which is add new, but you can also do patch. So you can do an update. You can do delete as well. If you want to do insert and update in the same flow, then then that's where you want to expand this filter. So in the filter, you basically need to work out, okay, this source list of 11 items, how many are new and how many are changed, right? And you compare that to your destination. And then from there, you end up with two lists. And the first list, you will do just all post. And the second list, you will do all patch. Okay, and you can actually combine both change sets into the final result here as well. Now, the SharePoint batch will handle up to 50 rows, 50 actions in a batch. So it's really powerful. You can also use batch for Microsoft Graph. You will need to use a custom connection or a HTTP request to do that. There are no connectors for Microsoft Graph that can let you call batch directly like this. Another area that you can use batch is actually CDS. You can use batch for CDS as well. Another one is actually I've done, which is to create not a batch, but to create a complex insert. If you're taking, say, SharePoint list and you want to push that data into a SQL database, you can do this. Insert into table like title, location, okay, values, and then you can actually do John home. Then John 2. So on. Okay, so you can build that SQL and then use flows, insert, execute SQL to database, and insert all those rows into SQL. You get this one big do or die SQL, but it's much quicker than individually creating SQL inserts one at a time. That's really slow. So that's batching. Now I'm gonna run out of time. I want to show you one more fun stuff, fun flow. Let's see if I can get time to run a fun flow. When am I going to run it? I'm going to do it here. So I have this fun flow. It's over here. I have a clip. Oh, here we go. Sorry. And copy this group by. So that's my tool Flow Studio. It has a whole bunch of utility tools for flow. I'll paste here. So that will give me a way to insert a little snippet. Now I do need to change this connection. I'm gonna connect to my SharePoint list. And the list I want to connect to is a copy item list. And let's say I want to do a group by on this location. So location. So group by, so that's be copy item list. And we're actually going to be grouping by not title, we're going to be grouping by location. Let's hope that works. So the valid JSON. Oh. Okay, go away. Okay. So I wanted to add one, it didn't work. Why is it unhappy? It's unhappy because, oh, oops. It did not have a connection ID, oops, sorry. Yeah, okay, let me just start a new one. My previous runs of this flow did not have a SharePoint. So it didn't have a SharePoint connection for this. So we just had to quickly run this. And then I'm gonna wrap up this demo. So this is a very common scenario, which is, oh, how do you do group by, or how do you run this thing? Not working. Oh, okay. Let me come back to that later. But basically, SharePoint itself supports group by. You do need to use Camel. So we can send a Camel query over into SharePoint. And it looks a bit crazy. But if you're just grouping by one column, it's not too bad. It's not that. And you actually see the output that's here. And it's a bit crazy. It's got this, it's actually all in a string. So you need to turn that back into JSON, which gives you this. And I will just show you here. So this is what SharePoint gives us, right? It's saying, okay, we're grouping by location. Then there is a word conference, and it's got a count of 1. There is a group called home, and it's got a count of 4. There's a group of school, and it's got a count of 2. And there's a group of work, and it's got a count of 1. So it's essentially what you would get if you were doing this. See if I do group by. And you see these numbers. That's what the SharePoint query does. But we can actually call that from Flow. So it's really powerful if you're wanting to do distinct or find duplicates, or just get SharePoint to help you. Because group by done in SharePoint is so much quicker than doing it back in Flow. You do need to do a bit of XML, and then you need to take the string of JSON and convert that into JSON when you come back, and then to work with it. My errors fell afterwards because I was still going by the title, where I should have remembered to location. So I won't try and fix that. But let me jump back to see if there are any questions. I might just see. Someone, I don't know whether that's for me. It probably is. Okay, I will summarize at the end. Ultimately, these are all individual techniques that put together to deal with the flows that I see very commonly in SharePoint and in Teams that's extremely slow, and also with Excel and with SQL. And it's always to do with looping through a large number of rows, and then you have to do individually something to each one of them. So the idea of using compose, or instead of using arrays, or sorry, using variables, and I lost my mouse. Using parallel, when don't do things in series, do in parallel. Use select to remap your big array of objects into ones with smaller properties. Use filter. So both select is like array map, and filter is like array filter. If you combine array filter and select, you can do a lot of map reduce patterns. And then I talked quite a bit about batch. Batch will significantly reduce a lot of API calls that you will use when you talk to SharePoint. It will save a lot of time. And also an extra tip. So this is a 6th tip, which is you can do group by using SharePoint Camel. Okay, and I might just end on that. So I hope you enjoy all these tips. You can find me on johnliu.net, on Twitter, John N. Liu, at John N. Liu. And the 2 products that I built, Power Studio is a tool that I use quite a lot. It's really my pocket knife of all my little Flow utilities. There's a clipboard, there's ways to find runs very quickly. And Power Clarity is a turnkey monitoring solution for Flow. So if you are an admin and you just want to know if your flows are failing, Power Clarity will tell you that. Okay, so that's all. Let me just check the chat again, make sure I've got all my questions answered. I think that's all. I don't know whether there's any more questions. So I might just wrap up there. Hope you've enjoyed this session. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think of these tricks I presented, or if you wanted to Feel free to contact me if you wanted to know a bit more about these things. There are more tricks, but I can't fit that many into this hour. So we'll have to start with these, and then let me know if you say, John, I mastered 06. It's more than 5.6. I need to know more, and we'll do that. All right. Hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. I have another session in about after an hour on a flow gem stack if you want to see me again on a second call. But otherwise, I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Bye.